And to get our teeth into the subject matter, we really have to start with the Blair Witch Project. Now, this wasn't the first found footage film. There was Cannibal Holocaust and others before it. But in 1999, it was a cultural phenomenon, skillfully using the internet to market itself as genuine, a real story. It was sold with the simple tagline, in October of 1994, 3 student filmmakers disappeared in the woods near Burkittsville, Maryland, whilst shooting a documentary. 1 year later, their footage was found. Now, Dave, I'm really interested. What are your thoughts? What are your memories of the Blair Witch Project when it first came out in 1999? And what are your thoughts on it as a film and as a cultural influence?
I do remember it coming out really well. And I do remember the marketing campaign. I think I first encountered the film on the internet. So I did briefly wonder. I was one of those people who thought it might be a real account and if the footage was authentic. Fortunately, I cottoned on quickly.
Yep.
Not much gets past me. And the campaign, though, by that point had suitably hooked me, so I decided to check it out. I actually defend the Blair Witch Project as a film. Now, I've met a lot of people, and a lot of them filmmakers, who really detest it and think it's rubbish. A lot of audience members think it's rubbish as well. I personally feel that if you're a filmmaker and you don't get what the Blair Witch Project does, that's not a good sign if you want to be a visual storyteller. People get too caught up on the production value, the graininess of the camera. Yes, it looks extremely low budget. It's not high quality, but the film does teach you about the power of suggestion, of leaving things implied to work on your imagination. And it is a great example of what found footage has. It's this ability to unsettle you with its immediacy.
I find that really interesting because I came to it in a similar way to yourself. I remember briefly thinking that it was real. I must have read about it in an article in a magazine or a newspaper or something. By the time it came out, I knew 3 things. I knew that it wasn't real. I knew that we didn't really see anything. And I knew it was supposed to be one of the scariest films ever made. That was the sort of marketing it had. That was the publicity it had. That was the hype that it had when it came over from America. And you need to remember we had delayed releasing. So it been this big phenomenon on the festival circuit. It had been a big hit in America, and then it came over. We kind of knew a lot about it, which isn't really the idea behind it. I think the less you know, the better at the time. I went to watch it and I thought, like many people that you've encountered, I thought, well, that was rubbish. I thought the first sort of 20 minutes were quite good, but then it was people screaming. It was poor production values. We didn't see anything. I got a little bit bored. And I thought, okay, yeah, I didn't think much of that, actually. I didn't really find it particularly scary or particularly clever. I spoke to a lot of people at the time and we all kind of felt the same. And we all thought, yeah, well, that's a load of rubbish. It's just this handheld camera thing that we've seen in the cinema. And we kind of knew what we were getting with it. And so what? Over time, I've sort of come to accept it as the sort of cultural phenomenon that it was. The way that the marketing really built, it really used the internet in a way that you couldn't nowadays to trick people into thinking that it was real. Nowadays, obviously, you can just go and look up the real story and find the real people. So I kind of thought, it's a cultural phenomenon and a film that if it hadn't happened, I don't think we'd be sitting here now discussing found footage. I then decided, right, 25 years later, I need to rewatch it. So I sat down and rewatched it with this podcast in mind, with knowing this was coming up. And I thought, you know what? I actually disagree with myself. I think it's quite good. I think the first 20 minutes, the build-up is excellent. I do think it is weak around the middle. There's a lot of repetition, arguments about them being lost.
That's a fair criticism.
And it does drag. Yeah, and it does kind of drag, and you do sort of think, what's going to go on here? But I think the final act is really good. I was watching it, having seen it before, knowing what happened, and I found my heart racing with the handprints on the wall, the black and white house, that iconic final shot. I thought, yeah, this is actually quite effective. I also feel that Heather Donahue's performance is very good as well. And I kind of sat and watched it and I thought, well, the problem was when it came out was we knew that it wasn't real. But then I think we kind of knew that about any horror film. I didn't watch The Exorcist and think, well, I know that's not real, so it's not scary, or Scream, that's not real and it's not scary. So I think I watched it in kind of the eye of the storm at the time and wasn't a fan, but trying to watch it as it was intended, still knowing that it had created this whole mythology and this whole marketing campaign, I thought it worked pretty well. But crucially, and this is perhaps where we can really get into the genre, it was unlike anything we'd seen before. Whether you loved it or hated it when it came out, we knew we'd had all these horror films. We'd had Scream, we'd had The Shining, The Exorcist was re-released in '96, I think, or '98, so very close to the Blair Witch coming out, and we knew what those films did. Blair Witch was completely different. It was about the power of suggestion. It was about being very much in the moment and sort of living in the living through it with these characters. So it was extremely original, and it moved the goalposts. And that's kind of my very interesting, I think, for myself anyway, journey with the film from 25 years ago to thinking it was a load of rubbish to actually thinking, you know what, it's not. And I'm more inclined to agree with you now about the Blair Witch Project. So there you go. And it's in my collection, and I'm going to keep it in my collection.